All right. Welcome, everyone. Happy Saturday, depending on where you are. Might be Sunday. Hope you guys have had a great week so far. Thank you again for joining us for session 3 of Youth Leadership Training for Ocean and Climate Action. I'm super excited for this session. You guys have been an awesome audience so far. Let me make sure the chat is set up. Yes, awesome. Okay, so we will get started in just a minute here, but first of all, go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. Let us know your name, your age, where you're from. And this week's icebreaker is, what is your favorite conservation-focused event that you've been to, and what about that event made it so memorable? That's going to come up a lot during this conversation today, so just think about it and let us know in the chat, and we'll get started in just a minute. All right, we've got some friends from South Africa, India, Morocco, by way of Italy, Canada, New Jersey, the UK, New York, again, Sri Lanka via the USA. We have Prudence from Indiana, nice landlocked. I love talking to landlocked ocean lovers. It's such a cool conversation. But Prudence's favorite conservation event was a coral reef restoration project. That's super cool. We have Kaysen from Kansas, also landlocked, which is awesome. Volunteering at their local zoo, which is super cool. Awesome. Good to see you guys again. Yeah, keep up this conversation in the chat, you guys. As usual, feel free to use the chat and the Q&A feature throughout the session if you guys have any questions for our wonderful speakers today. We will save some time towards the end for our Q&A. So, moving forward, again, as a reminder, we will have the recordings for sessions 1 and 2 up on the World Ocean Day YouTube channel shortly. They have not been uploaded yet due to a couple of technical difficulties, but we are working on it and hope to get those up as soon as possible. And then again, just going through the agenda for today, going through the welcome. I'm going to introduce our panelists. We'll have our little discussion, go through the Q&A, and then just a couple quick announcements at the end. So that being said, our first speaker is Wendy Ari Kent. She is the Conservation Program Manager for Safe Shark and Ray. She has had a lot of really great experience in the marine science world, but also the event hosting world. So Wendy, I'll give you a minute or two to introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm so excited to be here to talk to you. So I currently work for an international collaborative of over 70 organizations that are zoos and aquariums, researchers, nonprofits, government organizations, all aim to protect and recover shark and ray populations globally. My prior experience, I worked in an aquarium for about 20 years, and I planned many events as the education curator in the aquarium. And I've also worked in field conservation, working with youth on trail crews and doing different events actually in protected areas of the forest. So I'm really excited to talk to you today, and just thank you for being here. I hope you find this conversation really useful, and I will turn it over to Gina.
Yeah, so our second speaker, thank you, Wendy, is Gina. She is with the Indonesia Ocean Justice Initiative, as well as an Ocean Leader Fellow with Sustainable Ocean Alliance. And she is up super late in the evening, which I really appreciate taking the time. So Gina, go ahead and introduce yourself as well.
Hello, everyone. A very good morning from me. I'm based in Jakarta, Indonesia. My name is Gina Rehana. I'm currently working in a think tank based in Indonesia called Indonesia Ocean Justice Initiative. Basically, we are advocating more on the policy side for sustainable and equitable ocean governance. I'm personally working on blue carbon ecosystems, such as mangrove protection through law enforcement. And other than that, also about carbon pricings mechanism, we're developing a safeguard instruments. Aside from that, I'm also working on other things like the indigenous tradition Indonesia that protect the environment through their indigenous traditions. And aside from being a part of Indonesia Ocean Justice Initiative, I'm also a part of the Sustainable Ocean Alliance as their Ocean Leader Fellowship. And so excited to be here to share. It's very late, 1 a.m., but very, very excited to share and discuss with you all,
Oh
our
my
ocean
goodness.
leaders.
Thank you so much, Gina. Yeah, as you were speaking, there are folks sharing what time it is where they are right now. And 2 a.m., 5 a.m., you guys are really, really rock stars for taking time out of your day to join us. So, with that being said, thank you to our speakers. We'll jump right into this discussion. So, we are, session 3, event planning and fundraising. So, what we do here at Leadership Training is try to take what we learned from the previous session and build on it for this session. So last week we talked about social media and communications, building a little bit of a audience, learning how to communicate kind of complex concepts online. And what we're doing today is kind of moving that into real life. And what does that look like outside of the digital world? And how do we, engage community members? So these community events are powerful tools for advocacy, helping to shape narratives, mobilize communities, and create lasting momentum. So, in a few words, Gina and Wendy, we'll start with the first question here. How can event planning be used as a tool to shift narratives, build collective power, and drive conservation action in the long term? I will pass it over to whoever wants to go first.
I'm happy to go first. Thank you. So this is such an important question because sometimes conservation can not be such a fun topic. There's so many threats to biodiversity, to wildlife, to habitats. And so sometimes it can be kind of depressing if we think about it too much. So events offer us a way to have fun. They offer us a way to be inclusive, and they are more exciting for folks to participate in than sometimes traditional conservation engagements can be. And so the tool of event planning, when we talk about events, I think it's important. There's a spectrum of events for us to think about. It can be everything from World Ocean Day that we celebrate once a year. It can be field-based events where we are tree planting. I saw some people talking about community gardening, doing some coral reef restoration. It could be fun events like parties and galas, and it can be small events, things like bake sales or car washes. So there's so many different events that we're talking about, but regardless, we want all of those things to be fun for people. And so I think that when people are having fun, they're more receptive. They want to learn more about whatever it is they're engaged in. So events are a really good way to introduce people to your conservation initiative, to your effort, to raise awareness about the issues facing your conservation threats. And to engage new audiences. Some people might not come to a science lecture, but they might come to the beach and do a cleanup because they love being out on the beach. So thinking about events and the multitude and the spectrum of events that you can create is really important. But the first thing we want to do is we want people to have fun at these events. So I will turn it over to Gina and let her elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much, Wendy. I think you started with a very important notes about the different elements of event that there are. It can be small, but at the end of the day, when we're talking about conservation, push forward our agenda in the advocacy world. And I think that when we're trying to advocate something, including the process of it, of course, there will be like event planning, like what we're talking about right now. It's the important thing that we want to emphasize on why event planning is the key is that we're trying to building a system of trust in the event planning itself, because I think sustainable change happens beyond campaigning and beyond just one moment and one momentum that you utilize at the time. So that event planning, it's more than just one thing that you design, but I see that as an ecosystem. So what I mean by that is that when you're designing an event, I think it's more than just a logistic, but I always ask myself, like, when we're creating a theory of change, who are we trying to influence? Like, what mindset are we trying to shift? And how does it connect to like systemic change that we want to achieve? And in IOGI, in my think tank, the event like that we created, for example, we had for World Ocean Day 2024, we had an ocean climate open forum. So we invited several stakeholders from the small scale fishers, the people that work at the sea, and so many representatives to tell their stories. And we framed that conservation as justice and human security, and integrating all of that elements into one. And doing that process of designing that event, the Ocean Climate Open Forum, we have like the pre-event and the post-event as well. So I think seeing the whole thing as an ecosystem, like the pre and during and also the post-event, like the post-event planning, it's very important to first to build curiosity, and secondly to really connect the hearts and the facts that you want in the during the event, and lastly it's to ensure that sustain engagement
Mm. Gina,
afterwards.
your
So
audio
it's
cut
when
in and out. Can you hear me?
oh sorry, can
No,
you
you're
hear
good.
me now?
Yes, I think if you are able to turn your camera off, I don't like asking you to do that, but I think turning your camera off might make it so the audio comes through a little clearer. We're getting a lot of it. We're getting a good bit of it, but it is a little in and out.
Okay.
Laura, if I can just
Okay.
really quickly build.
Okay, I think but I'm done for that
Okay.
point. Yeah.
If I could just build a little bit on what Gina said, I think that you're setting realistic expectations is very important for any event. You may not create a conservationist with a one-off event. And maybe that's not the point of the event to create a long-term, lifelong conservationist. However, you can build on these successful events by creating those new audiences, engaging new people in your conservation topic. If you repeat the events often, like having an annual event, you're going to build on additional opportunities to engage people above and beyond that one event. So, and as Gina was saying, that post-event communication is key to keeping those folks engaged long term. So to your question, drive conservation action in the long term. I think when you're event planning, you need to have realistic expectations and think about what are our goals for this event, and then how will we build on that in the future.
Definitely. And I think both of you have tied this in really well with the second question here on the screen, talking about the long term. So getting more into the details, the nitty-gritty, right? We're talking about kind of broad terms, but in terms of like actual technical processes and tangible steps that event planners can take, how can we, we're going to talk about the beginning phases of event planning, and we're kind of doing it a little bit backwards with this question, talking about the post-event conversation up front. But when the event is over, how are we able to kind of continue that momentum and turn, like you said, Wendy, it might not be the exact goal of the event to create long-term advocates, but at least plant some seeds, right? How do we do that in an event?
Well, I think you have to pick activities that are going to relate to your event participants. You're going to have to think about what are they interested in? How can we engage them? How can we make this exciting and fun for them so that they want to continue to engage with you? But you also need to make sure that, as Gina also clearly stated, that you are conveying information in a way that they're going to be able to receive that information. That storytelling, those personal stories, are ways that we do connect as human beings. So using storytelling during your event is going to help kind of hook your audience perhaps a little bit more than just spewing facts and just telling things, especially things that might not be, as I mentioned earlier, the happiest. Climate change isn't always a fun topic to talk about, but those personal stories of how things impacted you and how you got engaged with this conservation effort, what was important to you, what was important to your family, those are ways that you can start to get your participants more interested in your topic. So, I think that you need to also think about how are you collecting and maintaining your participants' data? Do you have a good plan for following up with them post-event? Have they joined you on social media? Are they following you? Unfortunately, though, just because somebody is following you on social media does not mean that they're going to see your post depending on their algorithm. So you need other forms of communication, whether that's asking people to join a mailing list, to asking people to sign up for a newsletter, or visit your website. So you need to really think about that when you're planning your event, so you have all those tools set in place during the event to collect that information so you can continue that follow-up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a big believer that getting people's email addresses is one of the most important things you can do at events like this, especially for conservation initiatives where the algorithm tends to actively work against our favor. Gina, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think Wendy has explained that perfectly. Perhaps just share a bit. When I join a workshop, it's not that big, but I think it's like 60 people, 60, 70 people. But we came from very different backgrounds. And because we're very interested in that topic, afterwards, the organizer really, they were very aware that we are very keen to continue this kind of collaborations into something, perhaps another event or publication together, so that they may like a watch subgroup together, perhaps. I think building a continuity pathways in this space is very important to ensure that we have a way to connect. And because I think we all have social media or like applications that can streamline everything right now, we really need to utilize that. But in some projects, if possible, there can be ways to also make, like, perhaps, I don't know, it's just something that comes in my mind, like small mentoring circles or like micro campaigns that attendees can lead afterwards, that you can see like the potential champion of that causes that you want to advocate in that event that you are organizing. Because when you're organizing an event, there is perhaps someone that that's really eager in like asking questions or like mobilizing or asking you the question when you know that, when they know that you are the organizer. So I think identifying such person to also help you mobilize the momentum can also be important. So you can also work together to ensure that the event not just end on that day.
Yeah.
And I also agree on the storytelling points. I think that's very important. And we also did that in Sustainable Ocean Alliance when we have citizen dialogue. And I made reels on the camp, on like a campaign story on what happened the Pari Island in Jakarta when the mangrove are destroyed, and then the fish stocks is declined because of reclamations. I think that really connect people like beyond borders, although that they don't live in Indonesia. I think that shows how powerful storytelling really is.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, you did a great job of leading us into this next part of the conversation, finding the right people for your team. That collaboration really is a key part of successful event planning. Making sure that the people you surround yourself with are in alignment of the goals of the event and the campaign, and you're all kind of there for the same reason, but then also everybody has specific set of skills that they're able to share and lean on one another for to create a successful event. So when we talk about teamwork, different personalities sometimes work better, and that's kind of the people management aspect of this can be a little bit overwhelming sometimes for young people who have never done that before. And one of the things that I see a lot is, everybody has, especially young people getting their start in conservation, they have really, really strong opinions about how things should go. So when you're creating this event, how do you make sure that what your team members want is also in alignment with the end goal of the event itself? I know that's kind of a complicated question, but I'll pass it over to whoever's willing to take that one first.
I can take that one first,
Go
if I
ahead.
may. It's very interesting because in my think tank in IOGI, we are we are a combination of a Gen Z millennial generation, so mostly relatively young, but our CEO is kind of like very experienced, very senior. So the gap is very wide between the CEO and then the director. And I think what keeps us going is that even if that there are a lot of gaps in terms of like age and experience, and I'm also one of the youngest in the office as well. But I think what makes us a good team when we're also planning an event, and what makes an event successful at the end of the day is firstly is that whenever we are planning something and we're starting a project or we're doing something, we're always trying to tailor that into the values and the visions that we have in the office. So we have like the visions that we agreed upon, and that vision is always revisited every year, so we know that whether it is still relevant or not. I think it's very important to do so, and to ensure that everyone has the same perspective and also has the same say on the subject. And I think inclusivity in the discussion also important to ensure that everyone feels included and that every opinion matters. Because even if that I'm one of the youngest, I feel like my opinion and my take into the project that we are doing, the even that we're planning, is always be taken into account. So that I think that really works really well in order to ensure that everything runs smoothly. And secondly, I think, yeah, inclusive leaderships also matter, and revisit the purpose that we want to ensure that everything that we want to achieve is can be achievable at the end of the day. I think that's like the core, like the very core values that we trying to always implement. And I think that's why it works.
Yeah, absolutely. Those kinds of team building exercises are huge. Checking in, making sure everybody's on the same page. Definitely. Wendy, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. And it's just again building again on what Gina said. We know that traditionally there has been a lot of colonialism in conservation and a lot of not including communities that will be affected by and for your conservation planning initiative included in those planning conversations. And we need to shift that narrative. And so in order to ensure that our event or our campaign is going to resonate not with just those people planning, but also the wider community, your target audience, it's really important that one, you set those goals so that you understand the purpose that we kind of talked about during the last question. But we have to involve the right people from the beginning. We need to ensure diverse representation in our event planning team. If you're planning an event for a community, there needs to be a community representative helping you plan that event in order to ensure success. And with any conservation initiative, as Gina said, it is super important that everyone's voices are represented and they're heard, and that we ensure that that the meeting will meet the needs of the community that we're trying to reach. And so we can't stress that enough, that I should not go into a community where I don't live and plan an event for that community. I need to include that community in that planning, and I need to listen, even if they have a different idea than I do about what should happen. I need to listen and I need to value in order for that to be successful and to be truly inclusive in nature.
Yes, absolutely. That is a huge component. And again, you guys are doing a great job of leading us into these next questions here, because that does have to do with this second question. So, what role do partnerships and collaborations with community stakeholders play in things like amplifying impact and securing funding? And I will add to that the role that they play in making sure that the event is actually relevant to the needs and capacity of the community in which the event is being held. And then the second part of this question, I already see some really great stuff coming up in our Q&A here, which I'm excited to get to these questions. But how do young people, what does that look like for young people to start building and maintaining relationships with community stakeholders? I'll focus on that question here first. I'll pass it off to either one.
Well, I think you engaging yourself in those communities that you're wanting to influence and that you're wanting to find solutions for, talking to leaders in those communities, volunteering in those communities, participating in their community culture events. If you want to really have an impact, then you need to immerse yourself and understand the culture. You need to understand how they think about the topic. If it's climate change, what are their views on climate change, and how do they what are their thoughts on solutions? And really, you need to be as much a part of that and engage with that community to build and maintain those relationships. And as you said at the very, very beginning, build that trust.
Yeah, Gina, go ahead and add.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I just want to emphasize, when we're talking about partnership with community stakeholders specifically, especially with, like, when we're talking about the marginalized community or ocean dependent people, what we say here, or mangrove dependent people, the fishers community, those that are most impacted the most of climate change, and all of those very unsustainable practices of perhaps fishing and other things. I think it's very important when we're trying to find the solution and we're trying to create a program or an event or anything that relates to their livelihoods, is that we are co-creating with them, not only like including them just for tokenism. I think that's very, very important. And we really need to ensure that they are in their most comfortable point, because just to share a bit from my experience, when we're trying to push legal advocacy in Indonesia, where there's a tin mining company that threatened the mangrove dependent people and the fishers community, and they really threatening to their life, to the point that they come to their houses and they make some noises and make sure that they cannot like go fish again. And we're trying to ensure that what do like the next steps that they want to make is something that would not only good for our programs, for example, because perhaps, for instance, our program would be better if we just file a lawsuit against the company, but it will be bad for their security. But we need to also ensure that go hand in hand, that we can secure them a legal security from like the National Human Rights Commissions or like the Witness Protection Agency in Indonesia. So I think having such perspective and co-creating solutions with them, that's very important when we're talking about partnership and collaboration with community stakeholders. I think that's the first point. And that's when you're trying to make an impact. I think that's the real impact.
Mm-hmm.
That's how you make a real impact to the people that most affected. And the second question, should we also answer it now? Or
Yeah.
what can I think for young people, I think just 2 points that I want to highlight. I think Wendy can add so much more, but from my experience, I think firstly, just be authentic. Authentic also encompasses start small, start what you have. Look around you, immerse yourself with the knowledge, with what you really care about. Just don't do something that just because other people are doing it, because people are talking a lot about climate change now, you want to talk a lot about climate change. Don't do that. I mean, that's good. I mean, that's good to like raise the awareness, but I think it's also better if you can also nurture empathy right from your heart. So I think be really authentic, be really honest to yourself on why you are doing what you're doing. That's very important. And secondly, I think consistency. Everything, how no matter how smart you are, no matter how privileged you are, I think consistency is the key in like reaching the point that you want to achieve. I think that's really great that if you can be consistent, especially in an advocacy journey, because it's a long run. When we're trying to advocate for something, it's not an easy way to go get it, like to achieve it, especially in Indonesia. And my background is in law, and we're mostly in policy advocacy. So we have to deal with bureaucrats and a lot of like layers of institutions. So you really need to be consistent in doing so. I think that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think both of you have really touched on some key parts of this that I think are crucial for our audience to remember, and that is if you want to host an event that is for the benefit of your community, you have to be an active participant in your community. And both of you touched on a couple of different things that could look like in terms of, having conversations with different types of people. That can include things like small business owners, town leadership, elected officials, city council members. It could even look like professors and teachers and librarians, and just folks that you see walking around like a crossing guard. Even like if you have conversations with people who are really in touch with what's going on in your community, you'll be able to see the things that your community needs a lot clearer, and then you'll also be able to have an easier time of getting in touch with those people as well. Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to add too, and that it's super important that we meet them where they are at, right? You, as an event planner, are super excited. This is really important to you. You want to make a difference, but realize when you approach those communities, they may not have that same perspective. You need to meet them where they are and then bring them along with you through things like storytelling, sharing your personal experiences, making sure they understand that this is a human experience, something that impacts all of us, regardless of what communities we live in. And so I just wanted to just add, meet people where they are and bring them along. Don't assume that they're already where you are. And then that'll help you build relationships a lot quicker.
Absolutely. That is a huge thing to add, Wendy. I appreciate it. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the big picture stuff, right? And so now I want to move us into a little bit more of the specificity of what does it look like to plan an event, right? Most of our participants, our audience here today, is on the younger side. I'm sure a lot of you have participated in conservation community events before, but I doubt most of you have actually hosted them yourself, and that is okay. That's what we are here to learn about. And it can be, I'm speaking from personal experience, very, very overwhelming process to host, to plan and execute and follow up with an event as a young person. So I'll pass it over to both of you. This first question here: what are the first steps in turning an idea into a well-rounded event? Now, I do want to touch on last week during social media and communications, we did talk a lot about identifying your target audience. I know that's something that you guys have already brought up, making sure that like the event is relevant to your community. So we know that that's a key part. But when we talk about like, do I put together a calendar? Like, how do I get funding? Like, where am I hosting this thing? What does that process look like? So I'll pass it over to whoever wants to go first.
Well, I will say whenever I'm planning anything, and I know that there's specific outcomes or outputs that I want from that project. The first thing I do every time is begin with the end in mind. What am I trying to achieve? What do I want to see as a result of this effort? And then when you identify what you're trying to achieve, you start setting goals to how you're going to meet that, how you're going to achieve that, whatever it is that you identify. So for me, the first step is always thinking about, what do I want to see after this thing is done? And then what are the goals and steps that I need to take to get there? Do I need to involve different people? Do I need to think about a venue? Do I need to think about food? Because I'm just saying that most good events have food. As you know, food is an important part of your event. How much money do I need? After you've identified your audience, really thinking about what is the outcome you're trying to achieve, and then setting some clear and concrete goals to help you get to that outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I added a couple of notes on what you were saying into the chat. So again, hopefully you guys are able to copy and paste that into any notes that you guys are taking. But Gina, go ahead.
Okay, I think that's already a very great point. I may just add 2 points on that. I think the first one is that why are you doing this? Why are you making that event in the first place? I think that's the first question that you have to ask yourself. What kind of problem that you want to solve, or like that you want to advocate? I think from there, you can also map out the stakeholders that you want to involve, and not just an audience. That's also important, but also I think partner or like a collaborators. In my experience, mostly we are also collaborating with the government, but which ministry that we want to collaborating with? I think that's the questions that we want to also achieve, because if we can collaborate with a top institution, for examples, or like other than ministry, university in Indonesia, and in the university, which specific faculty or like research institutions in that university that we want to collaborate with. And if we have a strong like partners, back again to our previous topic on like partners and collaborations, I think that we can really reach wider audience that can really help us to reach our goals, and can also elevate the issues and the media coverage, especially when high level people come to the event. I think, yeah, that's the point that I feel like important as well to share.
Yeah, definitely. I think that that media aspect, especially if you have like a city council member like coming to speak to your audience, like even that is enough to like get in touch with your local newspaper and be like, hey, like they're going to come and speak, like let's get some coverage on this. Like that's a huge thing. And I think that again, you guys are doing such a great job of leading us into these next questions. When it comes to who you want to collaborate, making a list of what types of collaborations you'd be looking for, whether it's for funding, programming, promotion, etc. That's really, really key. So we talked a little bit about like making sure that your team works well together, but who are the types of people that you need on your team? As a young person, you might be the person delegating tasks. You yourself might have that skill set. You yourself might have more of a fundraising skill, and like you need to have somebody else on your team do the task delegation. So what are the types of skills that are needed to put an event together, and like how do you bring those people onto a team?
Well, that's why I start with goal setting, right? If I know what goal I have and I look at that goal and I say, I have no idea how to achieve this myself, but I know somebody who can help me, or I know somebody who can point me in the right direction. When you're setting out those goals, that kind of helps you to identify who are the personnel that can help you get to the end. So again, I think, goal setting and then diverse representation is really important, making sure that the right people are at the table. And sometimes you might think it's the right person when they sign up, but then you quickly might realize that maybe this isn't the right person. So that's a whole other issue you might have to manage as an event planner. But what we want to do is, if that in that situation you find somebody that can support this person to bring in another skill set to help you achieve that goal. So it's really for me, having it laid out in the goals that we need to do, what are the things we have to do, that helps me identify who do we need to get us there.
That's a great point. Yeah, I just added to the chat the importance of being adaptable, because you are so right. Sometimes you will add people to the team and you think that they have one skill set or that they're going to get along well with everybody else. And sometimes that's just not the case. And that's life. Like we have to learn how to deal with that and move forward. But really, really great insight, Wendy. I appreciate it. Gina, do you have anything to add to this question?
Yeah, I think it really depends on the context, and also like the skills that you need. I couldn't agree more on like what Wendy has mentioned. For examples, when we want to see the mangrove destruction in Indonesia, we need like someone who can help us on the satellite thingy. I really don't know like the detailed names of that things because I have a lot of background. I don't really know about like the um coding or like the satellite things about that. And we hire people to help us on like seeing the maps and make like have a layers of the maps to see like how much like from this year to this year the mangroves are destroyed, such things. And I think that's very context driven, and it depends on your um again depends on the problems that you want to achieve, depends on the goals that you want to achieve. I think it's very context driven. But I think the main thing is that you really need to ask yourself, and you really need to have a core team that you can discuss frequently. Because when we're planning an event, there'll be like a lot of last minute changes or error, and there has to be like backups in the last minute things. So having such discussion with your core team and revisit everything with even with yourself, during your free time, it's very important to ensure that you can minimize such risk of having last minute changes.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication between team members is huge. So whatever platform that looks like for you and whatever works for your team is really important, whether that's like a WhatsApp group chat, an email thread, there's like Asana and Slack and Microsoft Teams. Like there's all of these different things that you can use to help keep people on track. But then again, Gina, to your point, like I also GIS and mapping and all of that, like satellite imagery is so over my head. I cannot, like, that is not for me. My brain does not work that way. And
Yeah.
if I were hosting an event where I needed to have, like, if I were doing a campaign where I was presenting data to
Yeah.
council members, I would need a very specific person to be able to translate all of that for sure. So to your point, it is very much context based, but it is very important discussion to have for sure. All right. So let me just double check here where we are on time. All right, so we have 2 more slides left. I'm going to kind of prioritize some of our questions here just so we have time for Q&A. So I want to make sure we talk about budgeting and fundraising because as young people, we are not going to have a ton of capital accessible for us right away. It's just the assumption that we are starting from scratch. And I think, Wendy, to your point earlier, making a list of your goals is a really good way to figure out who your team members need to be and the skills that you need to be looking for, but also what you need to pay for. And there are a lot of creative ways that you can, reach out to your public library and see if they have an event space that you can get for free if you have a library card, or ask different, restaurants or local grocery stores if they will donate food. Like you can do that. But what are some other kind of creative ways for young people to gain access to capital, to sponsor the event, to pay for things? What does that look like depending on, what the event is and where it is? But as young people, what does that look like, I guess?
Well, I'm going to start with this one because it doesn't matter what your conservation initiative is. We need money to achieve our goals. There's a lot of different ways to go about seeking support for events. And I'm going to preface this by saying that my view is very Western view, a very North American view about how we are in this part of the world, how we are securing some funding for our events. So if this doesn't apply to you, my apologies, but this is my experience that I'm sharing. There are many, many businesses who want to be involved in social and environmental causes, but they don't know how. It doesn't align necessarily with their daily work. business sponsorships are a great way to help support events. They want their name on things. They want to be associated with your cause. And sometimes it can be as easy as having their logo at your event, having their information on your social media and your communications. Businesses want to be involved, and there are a lot of community foundations that fall into that as well. I know big corporations here in the United States like Target and Walmart and these different companies have a lot of community-based grants that you can look at for events. So that would be the second thing. Look and see if your community has any grant opportunities that you can apply for. Often those are very easy applications, and they happen several times during the year, which is helpful. Think about things like, can we charge admission for our event? If you're in a venue, we'll even accepting donations for entry into your event can help fund your program. But what's the most important is setting a budget that is realistic, and then you stick to that budget. So think about, what are your must-haves? What do we have to have in order to make this successful? And then you can add to a second list that's, what are those nice items that to have at our event? What would be really cool if we had enough money? And then even include a couple of, if we had all the money we ever needed, what are those things that we would add to our event? And outline those in your budget. And so when you're talking to people and you're seeking funding, you can be really clear and concise and direct and outline to those potential funders exactly how their money is going to be spent and how it will support the cause. And so communicating that requires, that you, again, use your storytelling, use the things that you've already learned in this course to help you get your point across to these potential funders. Again, meeting them where they are, because they may not know everything that you know about your conservation initiative. And you probably know more about the topic than they do. So be relatable. Everyone loves a good story, and they want to be part of that story. So really thinking about, how can you identify those potential funders in your community and then approach them to help them support your cause.
Yes, absolutely. I'm also taking notes here to share in the chat. Gina, go ahead if you have anything to share on this as well.
Yeah, sure. Perhaps I can share from more global South perspective. I think I divided into, when we're trying to fundraising, into two things. First one is when there will be like an open tender, when there's someone's open for like proposal. It can be a philanthropy, or like embassies usually also do that in Indonesia. Or secondly is through your network. Usually when it's open tender, they have this very specific timeline, and also templates that you can just use, and you can just ensure that you fill that correctly, and ensure that, I think most of them right now are focusing more on, for example, like the GETC perspective, like the gender, disability, and social inclusion perspective. So if you can really embed that principles into your programs, which I think in the conservations discussions or like projects are relatively easier when you can embed that principles and perspective, they'll be really great. And I think when you are also a new organization, for example, a new youth organization, you can do also a consortium with a larger organizations that are more well established. In that way, you can also learn from them the way that they write the proposals and everything. So there will be like a knowledge exchange during that process. So I think that's a good way for you to also strengthen your ability to write proposal. And secondly, through networking, you can also perhaps, I think youth are very creative nowadays. You can utilize social media to gain attention to your network, to your profile, so that you will be invited to their events I think embassies in Indonesia, for example, I can only speak for my experience in Indonesia. They have events that they usually invite potential partners, think tank or like NGOs that the visions that they think align with them. So I think when you write something to the national newspaper or like do something on the social media that attract their attentions, you can get invited, and in that way you can network your way out in the event, and perhaps you can write the proposal and send that afterwards to their office. So I think that's one way as well for you to strategically get a funding.
Yes, definitely. I am also taking notes on what you are adding to your local embassies. There we go. Okay. So hopefully that is helpful to you guys in the chat as I've been taking notes on what both Wendy and Gina have been mentioning. Let me just see. We are going to skip these two questions here because we have some really, really wonderful questions in the Q&A here. So we have talked a lot about I mean, all of the different aspects of planning an event, but this one particular question, how can this information and event hosting in general be useful for those of us who are very young? The person who asked this question is 16 years old. I know this can be used in my future, but what ways can I apply this knowledge now? And I'll just start out by saying it does not matter how young you are. And honestly, a lot of the things that we've been talking about, especially in relation to funding, people love hearing from young people. The fact that you are so young is honestly a huge driver for this, and even more reason for people to want to support you, because people love seeing young people go after their goals and try to make positive impact in their community. So I guess the question for this really is from Gina and from Wendy, what is just some good advice for a young person starting out in the event hosting space?
I agree 100%, Laura. Do not undersell yourselves. Even though you are young, you are taking initiative. You are showing interest in something that is impacting humanity, impacting your community. You are showing that you have integrity by being out there and trying to find solutions. And I think that one thing that really bugs me is that there are people, older people my age, that do not value youth voices. And that's super unfortunate, but I don't think they're the majority. And I believe that most of us are trying to build something greater for the future. Whether you're a business owner, you don't start a business to think that it's not going to be here in 10, 15 years, right? You're building for the future. As youth, you are also building for the future. And having that confidence, I would say practice, stand in front of a mirror and practice if you need to. Practice with your friends, with someone that you trust before you approach people, but don't undersell yourselves. I think to an extent, still, many of us have imposter syndrome. We think, well, nobody's going to believe me. I'm just me. What do I know? I'm just one person. And I can say that one person can change the world. One person has the power, and all you have to do is believe in yourself. And so, yes, you're 16, but you're here on a Saturday or a Sunday. You're taking the initiative, you're learning, you have the energy and the passion, and just believe in yourself. I think that's the main thing, because you can accomplish great things.
Absolutely. Gina, anything to add?
Okay. I think that when we're talking about advocacy, it's not about your age. It's not about the title. It's not about anything that comes like that comes with your names or whatever that is. I think it's more rooted and goes beyond all that. It's rooted in your belief in the system that's supposed to be, in the world that you think would be better, not only for human, for examples, but also for other living beings that we share our planet with. I think that it's what's most important that you have to keep in your mind. As long as you have such principles and such values that you keep embedded in your mind, just go, have that courage to take that first step, because you have no idea how that first step will lead you.
Yeah. Courage is huge. Thank you for tapping into that, Gina. It really is. It's not easy to do this work, especially alone, especially as a young person if you have never done this before. And it takes a lot of courage. And I think that I'm going to have this be our final question because we are at the top of the hour. There's kind of two questions that are similar that people have asked, so I'm going to kind of combine them. So somebody asked, what can we do if we feel that only I understand the purpose of the project, or that we don't know anybody with the same goals? And then somebody else also asked that they are in a country with very, very little support for environmental initiatives. So they aren't sure how to get funding, and they're looking for advice on how to get people to really care and connect with someone who can help them make change. And they think that social media only does so much. And so I want to combine these two questions because I think that I mean, what you were just saying, it absolutely relates to, you know, going back to the purpose and the goal, and then also, Wendy, the storytelling aspect that you mentioned as well. So for that as our last little conversation here, I'll pass it over to you guys to answer.
I just put a resource in the chat that I wanted everybody just to be aware of. It's a toolkit that you can get from our website. It's called Speaking Up for the Ocean Toolkit. It is written by and informed by social science, and it gives us a lot of ideas for how we can communicate about the ocean and speak up for the ocean in a way that's going to be impactful with our audiences. So before everybody left, I just wanted to share that resource. I think that what's really important is making sure that you are planning for yourself what you need in order to get people engaged. So what I talk about this all the time. What is your elevator pitch? What would you say to someone in an elevator that you have a couple minutes to talk to if they said, so what are you about? And be able to respond in a way that you could talk to anybody about what it is you're trying to achieve. And when you have that little elevator pitch and you practice that, that gives you some confidence to be able to talk really about your topic to more and more people. And then you can elaborate and add points to that, but really thinking about what is that elevator speech that you would give about what's important to you in conservation. How am I going to share that with people that I don't know? Practice it and see how you can keep building on that to have deeper and more meaningful conversations with people to get them engaged in your work.
Yeah, absolutely, Wendy. Elevator pitch, huge skill to develop, huge. And Gina, wrap us up. Give us our last little piece of advice here.
I think in terms of practical advice, Wendy is more expert than me. I should have learned from her. So I'm just gonna close it with something for us to think about after the sessions. I think when you're the only one who sees the urgency of the issues, be it ocean or like climate issues, remember that every movement starts with someone who refuses to be indifferent. It can feel lonely, when you're just the only person who sees that, to speak about things that people don't see, to fight for the ocean when others are still things that it's just something that you go for holiday, but there's not much beyond the surface. Or to talk about justice But I think that that's what leadership looks like in its earliest form.
Oh, that's a beautiful way to wrap this up, Gina. I wrote that quote that you just said in the chat. Every movement starts with someone who refuses to be indifferent. I feel like I want that like on a t-shirt or a coffee mug or something. Beautiful. Awesome. Thank you guys. So really quickly, I know we do have some more questions in the Q&A. We will do our best to answer as many questions as possible next week on our fourth and final session. Now, I've been talking about this every Saturday. Please note that tonight is daylight savings. Our clocks will go back 1 hour, and the last 3 sessions, including today, have been 2 p.m. EDT. So session 4 next Saturday will be at 2 p.m. EST, which is 1 hour before it normally has. So please be sure to check your local time converter and make sure that you are showing up at the correct time. I know it's super inconvenient and confusing, and I do apologize, but we will be starting at 2 p.m. EST next Saturday for our fourth and final session, campaign organizing. Again, like I mentioned, all of the recordings for these last few sessions will be up on the World Ocean Day YouTube channel. As I mentioned at the beginning of this session, we are having a little bit of technical difficulties getting those up, but we are working on it. I promise those sessions will be up as soon as possible. And then we also have gotten a couple of questions about getting a certificate of completion for the course. After session 4 next week, we will be sending out a feedback survey. We will let you know the deadline, the due date for that feedback survey when it is sent out. If you are able to send that survey in by the deadline, you will receive a certificate of completion for the course. That is the only way to get that certificate, is sending in that survey by the deadline. I cannot emphasize that enough. And if you do have any questions, you can email the Ocean Project's Director of Youth Engagement, Jihyun Lee, at jlee@theoceanproject.org. Now, I just want to give a huge shout out to Wendy and Gina. Thank you so much for joining us for this conversation. And Gina, get some rest. I hope the rest of you guys who are up super late, super early, get some rest. And we will see you here next weekend.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much. It's been great.
Thank you, everybody. See you later.
Do you need